"Your sister's housewarming party was so lovely," my mother said, her voice dripping with that special kind of sweetness that always came right before the knife. "When are you going to catch up?" She asked it right there, in the middle of Isabel's marble-floored entryway, surrounded by people holding champagne glasses and admiring crown molding. She asked it loud enough for my sister's new neighbors to hear, loud enough for Isabel's husband to smirk, loud enough to make sure everyone knew exactly where I stood in the family rankings. I smiled, and I said something polite and forgettable. But inside, something cold and clear clicked into place. A decision I didn't even know I was making. Because what my mother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already caught up. I'd caught up months ago. And what I was about to do with that information would turn their perfect little world into something they'd never forget. Before I tell you how I dismantled everything they thought they knew, tell me where you're listening from. Drop your city in the comments. And if you've ever been the family disappointment who turned out to be the only one paying attention, hit that subscribe button. Like this video and turn on the notification bell. You're going to want to see how this ends. But first, I would like you to do me a favor. Grab a cup of coffee as we ride together into this story. My name is Ashley, and for 28 years, I've been the rough draft to my sister's masterpiece. Isabel is 31, polished, and perfect in every way that matters to our family. She married a dentist named Cameron who has good teeth and better investment accounts. She wears cashmere in winter and linen in summer. Her house, the one we were all standing in that day, was a 4-bedroom colonial in the kind of neighborhood where people name their driveways. I'm a middle school art teacher. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment above a bakery. My car makes a sound the mechanic calls concerning. I'm single, I'm messy, and according to every family gathering for the past decade, I'm the walking reminder of unfulfilled potential. Our mother, Constance, has made disappointment into an art form. She doesn't yell. She doesn't lecture. She just asks questions. Gentle, concerned questions that land like tiny cuts. Are you still at that school? Have you thought about trying one of those dating apps? Don't you think it's time to invest in something more permanent? My father, Gerald, just nods along. He spent 40 years agreeing with my mother to keep the peace. I think he learned early that having his own opinions was more trouble than it was worth. But Isabel is the sun they both orbit around. The housewarming party was her crowning moment. 200 guests, catered appetizers, a string quartet playing in the backyard. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent and walked through her new home like a queen surveying her kingdom. I had arrived with a potted plant and a card, standard stuff. I genuinely wanted to be happy for her. We weren't close, not really, but we weren't enemies either. Just two people who happened to share parents and a last name. The house was beautiful. Hardwood floors, vaulted ceilings, one of those kitchens with an island big enough to land a plane on. Isabel kept saying she and Cameron had worked so hard for it, by which she meant Cameron's dental practice had done well, and his parents had helped with the down payment. But nobody mentioned that part. I was standing near the kitchen, eating a shrimp puff and trying to look comfortable when my mother found me. "Ashley, darling," she said, touching my elbow with her cold fingers. "Isn't this just wonderful?" "It's beautiful," I said honestly. "Your sister has really built something here." She looked around the room with this glowing pride that I'd seen 1,000 times but never directed at me. A real home and a real life. There it was, the comparison she didn't have to say out loud. Then came the question, the one I mentioned at the start. "When are you going to catch up?" I felt my face get hot, felt the familiar tightness in my chest that came every time my mother reminded me I was falling short. Around us, conversations continued. People laughed. Someone clinked a glass, but all I could hear was that question, echoing in the space between us. I excused myself and walked outside. The backyard was just as perfect as the rest of the house. Manicured lawn, flower beds, a stone patio with furniture that matched. I stood near the fence, breathing in the cool evening air, trying to calm the anger buzzing under my skin. That's when I heard them. Isabel and Cameron were standing just around the corner of the house, out of sight from the party. Their voices carried through the open window above me. "God, I thought she'd never leave," Isabel said. "She just stands there like a sad puppy." Cameron laughed. "Your mom wasn't exactly subtle with that catch-up comment." "I know, I almost felt bad." Isabel paused. "Almost." My stomach dropped. "Do you think she knows?" Cameron asked. "Know what?" "About the loan." I froze. Every muscle in my body went still. "No way," Isabel said. Mom and Dad would never tell her, and we're certainly not going to. Good, because if she found out they gave us $300,000 for this place and didn't give her anything, she won't find out. Besides, it's not like she'd even know what to do with that kind of money. She'd probably just waste it on art supplies or something useless. They both laughed. Then their voices faded as they walked back toward the party. I stood there in the darkening yard, the sounds of celebration washing over me like static. $300,000. My parents had given Isabel and Cameron $300,000. And I was living in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery, eating ramen 3 times a week, driving a car that sounded like it was dying, being asked when I was going to catch up to my sister. Something inside me didn't break. It crystallized. I walked back into the party with my plant and my polite smile. I congratulated Isabel again. I hugged my parents goodbye. I drove home in my concerned car and climbed the stairs to my small apartment. And then I sat down at my kitchen table and started making a plan. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I made coffee. I sat at my tiny kitchen table with my laptop and a notebook, and I started digging. See, here's the thing nobody in my family knew about me. I'm not just an art teacher. I'm good with numbers. I'm good with patterns. I'm good at seeing things other people miss. I started with the basics. My parents' financial situation. My father retired 2 years ago from his accounting firm. My mother never worked outside the home. They lived comfortably, but not extravagantly. Nice house in a decent neighborhood. 2 cars, both paid off. They took 1 vacation a year, usually a cruise. $300,000 wasn't pocket change for them. That was a significant chunk of their retirement savings. So where did it come from? I spent the next 3 days digging through public records, property transfers, and every piece of financial information I could access legally. I called my parents' bank, pretending to be calling about a charitable donation my mother had mentioned. I found an old family trust document my father had left in a filing cabinet when I'd helped them clean out their garage last year. Piece by piece, the picture came together. The money had come from my grandmother's estate. My grandmother, my father's mother, passed away 5 years ago. She'd been a sharp, independent woman who'd made smart investments throughout her life. When she died, she left a trust that was supposed to be divided equally between her 2 grandchildren, me and Isabel. Each of us was supposed to receive $350,000 when we turned 28. I turned 28 6 months ago. I'd received nothing. Not a card, not a phone call, not a single mention of any inheritance, because my parents had taken my share. They'd taken my $350,000 and given it to Isabel for her perfect house in her perfect neighborhood. And then they asked me when I was going to catch up. I sat with that knowledge for a week. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt this cold, clear anger settling into my bones like ice. I thought about confronting them. I imagined the scene, me walking into their house with the trust documents, demanding answers, watching their faces as they scrambled for excuses. But that felt too easy, too quick and too forgettable. I wanted them to understand what they'd done. I really understand it. Not just apologize and write a check, but feel the weight of their choices the way I'd felt them my entire life. So I made a different kind of plan. The thing about being underestimated your whole life is that people stop paying attention to you. They stop seeing you as a threat. They stop noticing what you're doing because they've already decided you're not capable of anything interesting. That was my greatest advantage. I started small. First, I documented everything. I made copies of the trust documents. I pulled records of the property transfer. I traced every dollar from my grandmother's estate to Isabel's house. I had a paper trail that would hold up anywhere. Then I made some calls. My first call was to a lawyer, not for a lawsuit, but for advice. I sat in her office, a modest place with overstuffed chairs and too many file cabinets, and laid out the situation. She listened with the kind of face lawyers make when they're trying not to show you how angry they are on your behalf. "This is fraud," she said finally. "Clear, actionable fraud. Your parents acted as trustees and violated their fiduciary duty. We could pursue this criminally if you wanted." "I don't want that," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "What do you want?" I smiled. "I want them to understand what it feels like to watch someone else get everything while you're told to be grateful for nothing." She leaned back in her chair. "That's not a legal remedy." "I know, but I still need your help." We talked for 2 hours. By the time I left, I had a strategy that was perfectly legal, devastatingly effective. and would take about 6 months to execute. I started with Isabel's house. See, when my parents gave them that $300,000, they'd structured it as a gift to avoid certain taxes. But gifts that size come with paperwork, forms that need to be filed, declarations that need to be made. I reached out to a friend who worked in property records. Casual conversation, nothing suspicious. Just mentioning how impressed I was with Isabel's new place and wondering how young people could afford homes like that these days. She pulled the records for me, sent them over as a favor. The gift hadn't been properly reported. The forms had been filed incorrectly. It wasn't criminal, but it was the kind of mistake that triggers audits. The kind of thing that makes the IRS very interested in looking at all your financial records very closely. I made a call. Anonymous tip line. Very concerned citizen noticing some irregularities in a property transaction. That was step 1. Step 2 involved my mother's social circle. My mother, Constance, belonged to 3 clubs, a garden club, a book club, and a charity organization that threw a gala every spring. Her identity was wrapped up in being respected, admired, seen as a woman of grace and generosity. I joined a charity organization. I volunteered for the gala committee, became helpful, reliable Harper who was always willing to stuff envelopes and organize silent auction items. I got close to the treasurer. A nice woman named Beverly who'd been with the organization for 20 years and took her job very seriously. Over coffee one afternoon, I mentioned casually that my parents had made such a generous donation to my sister's house fund. Really incredible, that kind of family support. Beverly smiled. Your mother is wonderful. She's always so generous with our fundraising, too. She really is, I agreed. Although between you and me, I sometimes worry they're overextending themselves. That house gift was a lot, and I know Dad's retirement funds aren't infinite. Beverly's smile flickered, just slightly. Well, I'm sure they've planned carefully. I nodded, said nothing more, let the seed sit. 2 weeks later, the charity board quietly began reviewing its major donors' financial situations. Standard procedure, Beverly assured everyone. Just making sure the organization was on solid footing. When they looked at my parents' donations over the past 5 years, compared to their stated income and assets, the numbers didn't quite add up. Not in a fraudulent way. Just in a where is this money actually coming from way. Questions started being asked. Polite, concerned questions. The kind my mother had been asking me my whole life. Step 3 was the hardest because it required me to sit across from my parents at Sunday dinner and pretend everything was fine. I showed up with wine and a smile. I asked about their week. I listened to my mother talk about Isabel's house, about how beautifully my sister was settling in, about the dinner parties she was planning. You should come to the next one, my mother said. Isabel's friends are lovely, successful people. You might meet someone. I smiled. That sounds nice. My father cleared his throat. How's school? Good, I said. Actually, I've been thinking about buying a place of my own. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Oh, yeah, nothing big, just a small condo, build some equity, you know. That's smart, my father said. Not meeting my eyes. I've been saving, I continued. It's slow, but I'm getting there. Maybe in a few years I'll have enough for a down payment. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. My mother recovered first. Well, that's wonderful, sweetheart, very responsible. I just wish I'd had a head start, I said lightly. Like Isabel, but I guess some people are just luckier than others. I watched my father's face. I watched the guilt flicker across it like a shadow. But neither of them said anything. I finished my dinner, helped clear the table, drove home, and continued executing my plan. The audit letter arrived at Isabel's house in early December. I didn't see it, of course, but I heard about it through the family grapevine. My mother called me, her voice tight with stress. Isabel and Cameron are being audited, she said. Some ridiculous thing about the house gift. Your father is beside himself. That's awful, I said, my voice full of concern. What happened? We don't know. Apparently someone reported. Irregularities, can you believe that? Someone with enough spite to make trouble for a young couple just starting out. I made sympathetic sounds, asked if there was anything I could do to help. Just keep your sister in your thoughts, my mother said. I promised I would. The audit took 3 months. During that time, Isabel and Cameron had to provide documentation for every financial transaction related to the house. Bank statements, gift letters, tax returns. And because the IRS was looking, they looked at everything, including the trust, including my grandmother's estate, including the fact that there had been 2 beneficiaries, not 1. The lawyers got involved, not my lawyer, their lawyers. Isabel called me in February. Her voice was sharp and panicked. Ashley, did you know about Grandma's trust? What trust? I asked innocently. There was money, a lot of money, for both of us. Did Mom and Dad ever tell you? No, I said honestly. They never mentioned anything. She was quiet for a moment. The auditors found it. They're asking questions about where my house money came from. Ashley, I think Mom and Dad used your share to help us buy the house. That doesn't make sense, I said, keeping my voice steady. Why would they do that? I don't know. She sounded genuinely confused, genuinely upset. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know that money was supposed to be yours too. And I believed her. That was the strange part. I actually believed her. Isabel wasn't evil. She was just spoiled. She'd spent her whole life being told she deserved more, being given more, and she'd started believing it was just the natural order of things. But finding out she'd been living in a house bought with stolen money, that shook her. What do I do? She whispered. Talk to Mom and Dad, I said. Figure out what happened. She hung up, and I waited. The confrontation happened at Sunday dinner 2 weeks later. My parents had called a family meeting. Emergency, they said. Everyone needed to be there. I arrived to find Isabel and Cameron already seated at the dining room table. Isabel's eyes were red. Cameron looked angry. My parents looked older than I'd ever seen them. I sat down. I folded my hands and I waited. My father spoke first. There's been a situation with your grandmother's trust. What kind of situation? I asked. My mother's voice was thin. There was money that was supposed to be divided between you and Isabel. Okay, I said carefully. We used it to help Isabel and Cameron with their house, my father continued. We were going to tell you. We were going to find a way to make it up to you. But then the audit happened and now everyone knows, Isabel said quietly. I looked at my sister, my parents, at the family that had spent 28 years making me feel small. How much? I asked. 350,000, my father said. Each. The number hung in the air. You took $700,000 from Grandma's trust, I said slowly, gave Isabel her share plus mine, and then asked me when I was going to catch up to her. My mother flinched. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Silence. Cameron spoke up. We'll sell the house, we'll pay you back, it might take time, but… No, I said. Everyone looked at me. You won't sell the house, I said, because I don't want your house. Isabel blinked. Then what do you want? I pulled out a folder I'd brought with me, set it on the table. Inside were copies of everything, the trust documents, the property records, and the timeline of their deception. I want you to understand what you did, I said quietly. Not just to me, to each other. I looked at my parents. You stole from one daughter to give to the other. You created a competition where there shouldn't have been one. You made me feel worthless while building her up with money that was mine. I looked at Isabel. And you let them. You built your whole identity on being better than me, on having more, on being the favorite. But it was all a lie. You didn't earn that house. You didn't work harder than I do. You just had parents who loved you more. My mother's face crumpled. Ashley, we love you. No, I interrupted. You loved the idea of me, the version that stayed small so Isabel could shine, but you never loved me enough to be fair. My father's hands shook. What do you want us to do? I stood up. I want you to sit with what you've done. I want you to look at that house every day and remember it was built on theft. I want you to watch your charity friends whisper and wonder where your money really came from. I want you to feel what it's like to be questioned, judged, and found wanting. Ashley, Isabel started. I'm not taking you to court, I said. I'm not demanding you sell the house. I'm not even asking for the money back because money was never the point. I picked up my folder. I walked toward the door. The point was that I spent 28 years thinking I wasn't enough, thinking I was the failure, the disappointment, the one who couldn't catch up. And all along you were sabotaging me, stealing from me, making sure I'd never be able to stand next to her as an equal. I opened the door and paused. But now everyone knows. Your friends, your neighbors, the IRS, your family. Everyone knows that the only way you could make Isabel's life perfect was to destroy mine, and you'll have to live with that. I walked out, got in my car, drove back to my apartment above the bakery, and for the first time in my life I felt free. It's been 8 months since that dinner. I haven't spoken to my parents. They've called, texted, and sent letters. I've ignored all of it. Isabel reached out once. A long email apologizing, explaining, and asking if we could talk. I wrote back one sentence. Maybe someday, but not yet. The house is still theirs. The IRS settled the audit with fines and penalties, but no criminal charges. My parents had to restructure some of their finances to pay it off. I heard through a friend that my mother left her charity board. Too much stress, she told people. My father stopped going to his weekly poker game. He couldn't face the questions. And me, I'm still teaching. I'm still living in my one-bedroom apartment. I'm still driving my car. But I'm also looking at properties. Real ones that I can actually afford. Because I did something else with all that information I gathered. I hired an estate attorney. Filed a formal claim against my grandmother's trust. And while it'll take time and lawyers and paperwork, I'm going to get what was always mine. Not because I want revenge, but because I want what I was always owed. The funny thing is, money matters less now than it did when I started. What matters is that I stopped waiting for my family to see me. I stopped shrinking myself to make room for people who'd never make room for me. I stopped trying to catch up to a race that was rigged from the start. And I learned something my grandmother probably wanted me to know all along. You can't build something real on stolen ground. Isabel's perfect house, my parents' perfect reputation, the whole perfect family image they'd constructed, all of it was built on a lie. And lies eventually always collapse. If you've ever been the forgotten one, the overlooked one, the one told to be grateful while others got everything, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Let's build a community of people who stopped apologizing for demanding fairness. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Because standing up for yourself isn't revenge, it's just long overdue honesty. Thanks for listening. And remember, sometimes the best way to catch up isn't to run faster. It's to stop running someone else's race. See you in the next one.